I think just the appreciation of the earth that we're on, the arena in which we're living. So yes, it is testing. The life of this world is a test, and that it can be deceiving, etc., etc. And it looks all great and wonderful. It dazzles you, and then it kind of goes, withers away. But there's that kind of fine balance to say, well, actually, I can be here. I can appreciate it for what it is. I can appreciate the one who's put us here and done all of this, but not also be kind of so caught up in it and vested in it that I lose sight of what's coming next. Because just remember that in the end, you're going to be, going back to him.
Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to our next episode of Quranic Transformation, continuing with our special guest, Brother Iqbal Nasir.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. هو الذي جعل لكم الأرض ذلولا فامشوا في مناكبها وكلوا من رزقه وإليه النشور. He is the one who smoothed out the earth for you. So move about in its regions and eat from his provisions. And to him is the resurrection of all. And in the other translation, he it is who has made the earth subservient to you. So walk in the path thereof and eat of his provision. And to him will be the resurrection. So here we have the interesting word here that the earth has been made dhalul. In other contexts, like the idea of like other connected words, like dhilla, for example, right, is like a kind of humiliation. Yeah. So obviously that's not precisely what the implication is here, but certainly there's this idea of subjugation, subservience. One of the translations was in terms of the smoothing out, but the point being that the earth has been put at your disposal. Okay. So here Allah is basically telling us about, effectively, one of the biggest blessings for us, which is that the environment that we're in suits us basically, and we suit the environment. And so there's this simple idea that both you can look at it on a very, just sort of a very literal sense, that the earth literally, like from the perspective of the earth on which I walk, has been made just easy for me to kind of walk on and travel across. And so I can do that. Or you can look in just generally speaking, right, in terms of how we utilize the earth for our sustenance, etc. And then both of those ideas then come up in the rest of the verse, right? So walk on its various pathways and eat from either his provision, basically, from his provision coming from the earth. So, one of the things that we don't often think about, or kind of or maybe like appreciate or understand, is that, like, Allah wants us to enjoy the blessings of this life, right? He wants us to enjoy them, to benefit from them. I often think to myself, look, and some worthy of reflection, which is that, there's lots of ways in which the earth or our lives on earth could have been very different. In terms, if we just specifically stick with the verse and think about the earth itself, it could have been a lot plainer, a lot kind of simpler. And very interestingly, like, it could have been, theoretically at least, like a lot less diverse. Okay. So in terms of, for example, in a way that's relevant to this verse, like, methods of travel, or the different ways in which we kind of travel, and the different sort of territories through which we have to go to travel. Like, travel involves all sorts of different types of, manakib, basically, from the verse, right? All the different kind of routes, pathways, etc. For long journeys, short journeys, different terrains, etc. So there's that kind of diversity, but it didn't have to be the case. Similarly, in what comes from the earth, right, there could have been one fruit, one vegetable, right, and that's it, basically. And so I was just making the point that when we think about that diversity of what's on the earth, right, in terms of the routes and pathways that we take, in terms of travel and the different types of, the nature of travel, which is kind of referred to in this idea of famshu fi manakibiha, as well as the at least in essence like the ease of travel, right? The idea that, because it's going to come up later on, but the idea that, you know, you put your foot on the ground and like, you know, you sort of, it holds you basically, right? And you're not, you know, it's not quicksand everywhere, for example, right? It's not jelly like, right? You're not, it's not like a trampoline park basically. You are just, you know, you can just place your foot and move forward, and in the context of walking, and then in context of other travel. But also the point about diversity in provision, as I was saying, you could have been one fruit, one vegetable, but no, you have like multiple, you know, multiple kind of different types of crops, vegetation, and things for us to benefit from, eat, appreciate, etc. So, you know, um, so the idea that Allah, you know, favors us with this kind of diversity, and if you want to say, even though it's not difficult for him, but you know, just as a manner of expression, you know, has gone to the trouble of basically like laying all of that out for us in a way that he didn't obviously need to or have to, we wouldn't have owed, you know, much less thanks if it was simply a case of, oh, there's only one fruit and there's only one type of vegetable. Do you see? Well, we would still be, you know, it would still be something to be grateful for. But the fact that it is as it is something which is quite, it's just remarkable to think about, amazing, and really, and it gives us like an interesting insight into, you know, like how Allah is, right? Like, meaning that clearly, as a creator, clearly he loves creating and having that array, right, of that diversity, you know, in colors, in crops, in, you know, food, vegetation, the nature of the earth, right? Different parts of the earth, you know, look almost completely different, but they're all part of the same earth, etc. So I'm just saying, like, I just think sometimes, you know, it's just, I think that's useful to think about, because oftentimes when we think about certain issues, problems, when we discuss various things amongst ourselves, sometimes you get very kind of like, you know, tunnel vision thinking, like very, you know, things become very sort of one track, you know. And I think whenever we find that ourselves thinking in a very kind of one track kind of way, we should just remind ourselves that the very God that we're worshipping himself, like, has a very clearly manifests a huge diversity and variety, you know, and then not least, and obviously the types of, you know, human beings, from language, color, origin, etc., etc. So anyway, I think, you know, just the appreciation of the earth that we're on, uh, the arena in which we're living. So yes, it is testing. The life of this world is a test, and that it can be deceiving, etc., etc. And elsewhere, as we know, Allah uses vegetation and the life cycle of vegetation as an analogy or reminder of what the life of this world is like, right? It looks all great and wonderful, it dazzles you, and then it kind of goes, you know, withers away. But there's that kind of fine balance to say, well, actually, I can be here, I can appreciate it for what it is, I can appreciate the one who's put us here and done all of this, but not also be kind of so caught up in it and vested in it that I lose sight of what's coming next. Because then he says and finishes, wa ilayhi nushur, you know, and to him is the ultimate kind of, you know, rising, literally. And so you have, you know, just as you have your ups and downs and your rising in the context of travel, you have the rising in the context of how provision is coming out of the ground. We as human beings will obviously rise up in the end in front of him, and he just perhaps, you know, included that there just to remind us that it's not all about that, right? But it's there for you to enjoy. He's done that for you, but just remember that you're, in the end, you're going to be, you know, going back to him.
Beautiful, mashallah. Yes, I think, and as you're talking about some of the things that popped up in my head, I think, which was what you started with, that, you know, it's okay to enjoy, it's okay to relax, and it's okay to, you know, use the permissible things. And sometimes some people may think, oh, Islam is so hard and I have so many rules and regulations, what have you. But if you really, you know, step back and realize what it is actually asking you to do, there isn't much, right? It's kind of like how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put our father and mother in Jannah in the first place and said, you know, you can eat and drink whatever you want, and then just had like one boundary or one limitation with that tree.
Yes.
Similarly, you know, we have maybe 5, 10, 20 things that we encounter that are impermissible or not allowed. Other than that, there's so much more that we can do, and a variety of experiences, variety of things that we can consume and enjoy and have a really peaceful life. It's just sometimes that desire shaitan creates of the haram, that kind of creates a struggle, because we keep focusing on, why can't I do this? Why can't I do this? But you have these other hundreds of things that you can actually do and live a really simple life, sort of thing, right? But then I think, which is also a good thing, that as we, you know, raise our bar and have higher aspirations, sometimes in pursuit of those, you may go on the other extreme, and then you might be, fiddling with the idea of engaging in haram or being uncomfortable because you're not meeting the numbers, and you're having this emotional anxiety and whatnot. But you can really tone it down to a level that you are comfortable with.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. And it reminds me, there's the verse, قل من حرم زينة الله التي أخرج لعباده والطيبات من الرزق. So قل هي للذين آمنوا, and then خالصة يوم القيامة, right? So the idea is that say who is it that prohibits Allah's if you like adornment for his servants and the wholesome things from his provision. So the idea that so just to emphasize this idea that it's there for us, right? And then it's for the it's for those who believe, and especially for those who believe, right, in the hereafter, right, on the day of judgment. So yeah, so this idea of sometimes, like, we have a very I think the way some of us have kind of experienced the deen culturally, let's say, or just in the various settings in which we may have grown up or whatever, the overall feeling or narrative is that, well, this Islam or submission to Allah is really about what you shouldn't do, can't do, mustn't do. But like you say, actually, the list of those things is not only relatively small, but it's also like, for any kind of thinking person, it's also perfectly kind of reasonable, because you can see why the prohibitions are there. They're not in the best interest of, individuals and societies, collectively speaking. Whereas, yeah, like you said, the opportunity then to go and explore and to create, to do stuff, to develop yourself, add value, learn, appreciate the vast kind of things that one can do with their life, perfectly within the bounds of what is lawful. But more so, it's not just about being lawful. It's about actually what you. I do think that it's useful for us to see the actually that kind of exploration, that self-development, and really sort of discovering our potential as part and parcel of our worship of Allah, because He's given us our faculties, He's given us our opportunities, our context. So the more we can make of it, well, then that is about using what He's given us to be grateful to Him and to serve Him in the best possible way.
Grateful. And I think, as you were saying, that how someone with a sound rational can see that there is value for the collective behind it. And I think if I were to make that connection, that when the earth or the setting up of the earth or the water around it, they transgress, or even the wind transgress, obviously by the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that's when calamities come, right? Whether you're flood, right, which we are seeing, may Allah make it easy for our brothers and sisters in Pakistan, for example, or the thunderstorms or hurricanes that we have seen recently in the US. All these things come up when these, the natural world that Allah has set up around us to serve us, they transgress its boundaries of the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They cause chaos, right? And similarly, when human beings do the same thing, that's what they are bringing on earth as well from their actions.
Yeah. I mean, I think, these things, I mean, they can be based on, I mean, my understanding is that we can never know for sure, like, what the reasons are behind this or that, right? Like, is it actually a kind of a punishment or a retaliation for something, or is it just a test, basically, and part and parcel of the way in which Allah decides to take certain lives and and bring people's earthly existence to an end? I mean, obviously, it's well, either way, it's certainly a reminder of Allah's power and our vulnerability and the transient nature of this life, for sure. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And just to be, I wasn't, not to imply that I guess the calamities or hardship from Allah, as you said, could be either or, right? It could be a test to raise us or elevate us, that happened to the prophets, the best of us, but the point being that obviously our actions, when we transgress from the boundaries of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, will have some sort of impact. Not necessarily that.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And he says that, of course, famously, ظهر الفساد في البر والبحر بما كسبت أيدي الناس ليذيقهم بعض الذي عملوا لعلهم يرجعون. That corruption spreads in the land and the sea, because of what people have done.
Right.
in order for him to make them taste
Some of what
some
they've
of
done.
what they've done, right?
Just
So
this is a reversal
you
of that.
yeah, you get a sense of the consequences basically. So the fact that there is cause and effect, is past the point of it is that the benefit of it is okay, fine. We actually see the harm that's being caused, the results, لعلهم يرجعون, so that hopefully they'll come back to the straight way and the balanced way. So yeah, no, absolutely. And sometimes it's more obvious, right? Like in terms of, you can make a much more direct connection between human action and then, and whatever the negative result is sometimes. Obviously in these kind of what we call, natural disaster type scenarios, it's harder to necessarily, I mean, people sometimes draw that connection, and possibly that's definitely there. And there's definitely places in the Quran where these things are mentioned as consequences of human rebellion, let's say. But yeah, anyway, that's just to give a
Beautiful.
broader perspective on it. Yeah.
Right. And I think just wrapping it up with the last point you mentioned about, knowing that, yes, you can do whatever you want, but eventually, whether you see some of those effects in this world or not, finally you have this meeting with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? And then how we may look at it like from different angles, even if you're a student and you are kind of thinking about hopefully about your final report card, right? That you have this accountability to an employee for your quarterly or annual reviews and performance appraisals and whatnot, to a CEO being accountable to a board and, to shareholders, board of directors, to shareholders, what have you. And then we have these annual meetings or quarterly, whatever it is, and people have these things, at some point as in focus. But then that kind of helps us to remind that, yes, you're worried about these day-to-days, but then this great event or great meeting and accountability is coming up. So be aware of that.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Okay, so with this, we'll wrap up, inshallah, and see you guys in the next episode.